I was thinking about this last night and I came to a realization that so many people around me have no clue how to argue. I'm not trying to point a finger here because I doubt the person I'm talking about or the people I'm talking about are watching this video. But honestly, everyone who's watching this video probably sucks at arguing. The point is not to become a good arguer, the point is to become a good friend or a good whoever you are to the person you're arguing with. When we look at professional debates, people usually, sometimes, not often, but sometimes, people get emotional, and that shows a lack of integrity because it's a professional environment. And you know, it's really difficult and it's very easy to break down in those kinds of situations. But what you normally see is someone who's good at debating would address the logical issue at hand before getting to the underlying emotions of the topic. Whenever someone's saying something in a debate, they're making a claim or they're making an argument. Not always, but sometimes there might be an emotional underlying issue that is driving the force of the argument. And a person who's good at handling arguments and is good at replying to them will ignore the emotional aspect of it and focus only on the logistics of it, which is great, which is what should be done, which is what every good debater should do. That's how debates work, that's how discussions work, that's how uh, I see this a lot on the news. When there's a discussion going on in the news and it's a debate usually, now I'm talking about Indian television here, it's gonna be completely incoherent. You won't hear anything about whatever's anyone trying to say, uh, because there's so many emotions tied to it. And by emotions, I don't mean sadness. Emotions, when someone's emotional, it doesn't mean that they're sad. It just means they're highly volatile with any kind of emotion they have. And on the Indian news at least, you see a lot of people being angry, and I haven't seen anyone cry honestly, but angry and resentful and very, very, very um, aggressive. Now, this is a professional environment, and I'm bringing it up because a lot of people take the same approach without realizing it in their personal arguments, which is completely different. And not everyone, but some people or many people do this. And it's no doubt that when you're arguing or when it's a difficult conversation with someone that's really close to you, it's a family member or it's a friend or it's your partner, whoever it is, it's really important to address the logistics of the issue. But what's more important, whether something is right or wrong, what's more important is how they feel and how you feel. And people forget this. People absolutely forget this because, and it's valid they do. I was very much like this. Um, Regardless of what the issue was about, I was really just concerned with making sure that I got my facts straight and they got their facts straight and it was all sorted out logistically. But in the end, both of us would end up feeling horrible because none of the emotions were really addressed. And I got better at it. And I think I got better at it by looking at how other people argue. And this is what struck up the conversation in my mind in the first place to make this video or to talk about this topic. I just saw people arguing, and I'm like, this is not how any of this should go. And it's so complex. It's so, whenever you get the chance, try to observe how an argument goes. Any argument, it doesn't matter if it's a good or a bad one, or if it's an argument that's well handled or not. The one thing you'll see is there's always emotions involved, and they play a major role in the reactions of every party that's participating in the argument. Every person has to say something. Every person wants to say something, and it stems deeply from what they feel and how they feel. And it's not even that their emotions are driving it. Sometimes their emotions are, well, obviously emotions are very uncontrollable a lot of the times for many people, but it's not just that. It stems even deeper, it roots even deeper into their past experiences, and none of which might be communicated to the other person who's trying to understand these, which makes it so much worse. And I guess what I'm trying to say is there are so many simple and very tiny things that can be done to just make an argument a whole lot better than it should be. See, you shouldn't ever chase a perfect argument, a perfect fight, or a perfect discussion, whatever. It's never gonna be that way. But the least you can do is make sure that the basics, that you are acting accordingly, that you are making sure everything that you need to say is being said in the right way. You might have heard this phrase that it's not what you're saying, but it's how you said it. That's genuinely very true. It actually does not matter what the argument is even about. If it's conveyed in a certain way, it can go beautifully, or at least it can avoid a lot of pain. And that's the human nature. We want to avoid as much pain as possible. But in this case, it's not about pain. It's about, well, it is about pain, but it's not about your pain. It's about the pain that's being caused to the other person. And I guess this is the first point I want to talk about, is that people forget that they love someone when they're arguing with someone. And this happens subconsciously, obviously, but people just forget that the person they're arguing with is someone they love. And obviously, I'm not saying that every single argument is every single argument happens with someone you love. It's a different case when it's happening with like some stranger or something. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about interpersonal relationships and the arguments that happen in that. That people often forget that they love them, and that's natural, because you're overwhelmed with all of these different emotions that have to do with you and your trauma and what they did wrong and why it hurt you, that you just forget for 1 second, that not 1 second but but a long time, that you love them. And that is genuinely very, very destructive in the moment, because the moment you forget you love them, when you realize that you've forgotten to love them in that moment, it hits you like a truck. That's where a lot of the guilt comes from. After the argument is over or whatever, you might feel a lot of guilt that, oh my god, I shouldn't have said that, and you feel that way because you just come back to the realization that, oh my god, I love them. So what should be done about this? Well, first of all, stop trying to consciously remember that you love them. It's not going to happen that way, because you'll just force yourself to try to feel something you aren't feeling. The best thing you can do is, for just a moment in the argument itself, when it's happening, to stop thinking so internally. Stop having that inner monologue inside your mind. Just for a moment, remind yourself of this, to stop thinking about yourself and think a bit externally, outwardly. Push your energy outside and look at them. Why are they feeling how they're feeling? And this is where the love aspect comes from, is you don't remind yourself that you love someone by telling yourself that you love them and that you should act accordingly. You remind yourself that you love them by looking at them and seeing how they feel, or what they look like, or what's going on there. So many times if the other person is crying or whatever, we we hate that. Obviously, we don't want someone to cry, especially because of us. But if we forget for one moment the fact that they're crying because of us, and just focus on the fact that they're crying or they're feeling so horrible, and it's visible, it's physically manifested, all those feelings are physically manifested in an argument, or when someone's overridden with emotions, you can see them on their face, on their body. They might be shaky, they might be feeling really small, and you can see all of that. And the best way to remind yourself that you love them is to just look at that, and it should come naturally. If you're a decently considered person, it should come naturally. Yeah. I've had so many arguments with my mom, and I just fail to realize in the heat of the moment that this is the woman that has fed me every single day of my life and continues to do so. And she's crying because of me, or she's, whatever it is. And that just reminds me that, what, fuck the argument, I love her. And yeah, this is important because you might think it's a bit counterintuitive. Not counterintuitive, but you might think it's not the most useful thing, because if you're already engulfed in emotions, the last thing you want to do is add more emotions to it. But people fail to understand the distinction between a positive emotion and a negative emotion, especially when they're already overridden with emotions in the first place. So, to sum up, uh, the love part is just remind yourself that you love them. And you don't have to do it in the way I told you to, but just try not to force yourself to think that way, and just let it naturally come. Or, think of this is one thing I did a lot with some people is I thought of them as a child, as a, like, not in a demeaning way, but I imagined them as a baby. Like, what were they like when they were a baby, when they were a child? And well, if you're close enough to someone, you might have pictures of them as a baby, so that helps to think of that. But even if not, it works because it makes you realize that they're as human as you are, and they were also once a baby, and just like you were, and incompetent and stupid and throws up and poops everywhere. uh, yeah, it's something that works for me. I don't know if it works for you. If it might, then that's good. But yeah, so let's say you did that. Good job. You now realize that you love someone that you're arguing with. Now that doesn't mean you leave the argument aside. It just means that you prioritize their feelings and your feelings first. I mean, their feelings first, and then your feelings, and then the argument itself. It's so important to do this because the argument itself, the logistic of the argument, regardless of what it is, it doesn't matter who's right or wrong. There's no specific situation. But whatever it might be, it can never be solved effectively if both people are not thinking rationally. And this rationality comes from, it might sound weird, but it comes from love. It comes from understanding that I want to have a civilized and proper discussion with this person because I love them. And so this positive emotion plays a huge role in making sure the discussion goes well. So let's say you've done that. You've crossed that line of connecting with their emotions, understanding you love them, whatever. Now I think it's time to be vocal. And by be vocal, I mean verbally speak the truth and be obvious about it. Say obvious things. And I say this because when we're overwhelmed with emotions, we often forget the most obvious things. The most obvious things are overlooked. And that's the one thing everybody needs in that sort of situation, is to just be reassured of the obvious. It's kind of like when someone asks to tell you that you love them, And you're probably like, but isn't that obvious? It's not about the fact that it's obvious or not. They know you love them, but they just want to hear it. And something similar happens in this situation. So if you're arguing with your friend or your mother or your father or your partner, just tell them that you appreciate them. And if for any reason you can't, maybe at least vocally say that, you know what, I care about you too much to have such a poor discussion, or whatever it might be, whatever your morals might be. The key is to reassure them, and this is incredibly difficult to do. I'm just gonna say it. It's incredibly difficult to do if you're not a patient person, or if at least you're not feeling patient in that moment. It it is, yeah, it's just really hard, especially when you're dealing with someone who's very angry, who has a very bad temper, and you lose your patience before you even get to telling them that you want to reassure them. So there's honestly no way around it. uh, you might want to take a break and then come back to it, and then that's fine if that works with you guys. But you have to do the difficult thing. It doesn't matter. It genuinely does not matter how difficult it is. It is the right thing to do. Because, and I'm not saying there's always going to be some anomalies, but most of the time, the moment you do this, the moment you calm down, the moment you lower your voice and just say, you know what, I care about you, or in whatever way you want to say it, something, it's going to be very weird for the other person, because they're like, wait, why are you saying this, why are you talking in this sort of way? And in a good way, obviously, because they'll be like, oh, thanks, I need to be reminded of that. And more likely than not, it's going to calm them down as well. And sometimes it doesn't. It's happened with me. And sometimes, regardless of what you say, what you mean, it doesn't work. And it's not the point where, I mean, you're not helpless, but in that specific moment you cannot do anything at all. And the thing I've found to be working the best is to just give it time. And by give it time, I don't mean let days go pass by. I mean, stop the conversation and say that let's regroup in 15 to 30 minutes, whatever it is. And they might be completely rejecting of that idea, and I'm pretty sure they will be. But just say that. Just say that. Don't wait for them to say yes or no. Just say that and go take your time. Let them take their own time. Come back to it, and then just very calmly bring it up. And they very likely they might be open to it now, because time has passed. The worst thing you can do is sleep on it. Do not sleep angry. It doesn't matter how late it gets. Just keep this as a rule within your relationships, that you will not sleep unless the issue is solved, because once you sleep on it, it's kind of doomed. Yeah, anyways, so let's recap a bit. The first point was to remind yourself that you love them. The second point is to be vocal. And now it's time. So when I say be vocal, I talked about being vocal about how you care about them, and restating the obvious. There's another layer to it. Restating the obvious doesn't always have to do with what you feel. It also has to do with how they feel. Everybody wants to be accepted and heard and assured and reassured. And the best thing you can do for them is to verbally say that you understand how they feel, and be very specific about it. Be very specific about what happened and why it made them feel that way, and that you understand that. Now, again, in some situations, you might be dealing with someone who has a very, very, very poor temper, and they might not even be ready to hear that. But that's not important. It's not important whether they're ready to listen to you or not. Just the fact that they can hear you is important, because once that temper dies off, they're gonna they're gonna remember what you said, and it just hits them later on. Something I've heard Jordan Peterson say is, if you want a behavior to be repeated, the best thing you can do is call it out and then appreciate someone for it. I'm paraphrasing here, so uh, but basically, and this goes a bit off the topic, but I'll tell you how it ties in. If someone did someone you some if something oh my god, if someone did something you like, if your friend gave you like if your friend put his arm around your shoulder and you like that, or if your mother made some really nice breakfast, and if she made your coffee in a certain different way today, whatever it might be, you like it and you want it to happen again, then you say it. You specifically state what they did to them, and then you say that you like it. So if someone gave you a really nice gift out of nowhere just for being kind, then you say, hey man, I noticed you gave me a gift and you didn't have any reason to do so, but you went out of your way to do it, and that's very nice of you, and I'm really happy for that, and I love you for that. Do it in your own way, whatever it is, but make sure you cover the basics of the point, that you state what they said, and then you appreciate them for it. If you do this, you will people will do more things like that, because they like being reassured the fact that they did something is good. Now, this is not a manipulation tactic. You only say this if you're truthful about it. You don't if you only do this if you actually like what they did, and you know it brings you joy and it brings them joy doing it. Obviously, don't misuse it. If you misuse it, I'm gonna come to your house and do something. So this ties in with the argument thing, in the way that when you point out something someone did in a negative way, that you know what you when you blame them, so when you point a finger and you say, this is what you did, you never listen to me, you're a bad person, whatever it is, then that reinforces the fact that what they did was wrong, and they start to have a horrible image of themselves. And that's the worst thing you can do to someone. That's the worst thing you can do to someone you love, is point a finger and specifically state something bad that they did and say that you don't like it. Now it's basically the inverse of what I said, and you can use it positively in the same argument, and you can say that, hey, you know what, I noticed that you were listening to me when I was talking without interrupting me, and you waited for me to finish uh, before you wanted to say something, and I really appreciate that, because listening is so important. Once you reinforce that to them, because in their mind, when they think they're doing something good or something bad, the best thing you can do is reassure the fact that that something good or something bad is what it is. And so the point is to use this positive reinforcement uh, to make the relationship better, not only in its uh, regular daily life kind of way, but especially in this argument. Point out the obvious in the fact that what they did is something you like, or uh, something they did like 3 arguments ago. You could bring it up again and you say, you know what, I really like this. The whole point is to make the other person as less volatile as possible, and you only have so much control over that, because it's their feelings and they're gonna manifest it in their own fucking way. You don't have a lot of control over that, but you have some control over it. And so the point is to do the best you can. Now, coming to the logical side of the argument. So this is a it's going to be different for everybody. Not everyone has the same kinds of arguments about the same kinds of things, but there's always a factual, objective side to the argument. Now, in the entire sense of the argument, I think the logical side matters maybe 30 or 40%. The emotional side matters a lot more. But I guess the best advice I have for it is to be truthful. And I know it might, like, everyone's told you to not lie, whatever, but I doubt I doubt a lot of you people have actually genuinely tried being truthful, because once you do that, once you be truthful regardless, or at least try not to lie, you and you observe your environment, things are going to be changing. And if you just see what happens, you're going to be fascinated by that in some sort of way. Even if you're not fascinated, at least you're going to be very intrigued, or it's going to it's probably gonna flip some switch in your mind and make you more introspective. And there's no reason to not try it. Just do this experiment. Just go like a week, 10 days without lying, no matter what. Regardless of how bad something you did is, you don't lie about it, you just face the consequences of your actions. And what I've found is, not only does it make you more responsible of the things you do in the first place, of the mistakes you make, well, first of all, you have to understand that it's inevitable that you're gonna make mistakes. So the point is not to avoid as many mistakes as possible. Obviously, you should do that whenever you can, but whenever you inevitably do make a mistake, the best thing you can do is be truthful about it and see how you can handle it. See what happens. See what consequences that you're going to face. And if you made a mistake, people never get away with anything. That's just the truth. You can never get away with anything. And so the best thing is to just deal with it head on, face the consequences, and then let it go, and then just forget about it, learn from it, whatever it might be. Coming back to the argument itself, I think, as I said, since the emotional side is so much more important, it generally does not matter if you are right or wrong. If you did something wrong and you know it is wrong, then the worst thing you can do is lie about it, because not only are you lying to them, you're lying to yourself. You're being ignorant. Sometimes you don't even know if you did something wrong, and that's just poor self-awareness. That's a whole different topic. You need to just, at that moment, there's no point in having that argument in the first place. You need to sort your life out. You need to go out and talk to yourself. You need to be introspective. You have to work on yourself and then come back to the argument. But when you know you've done something wrong, just don't lie about it. Not only does it, see, it doesn't matter if the other person knows if you're lying or not, because, well, either you're deceiving them or you're not. And I would rather not deceive someone I love, regardless of whatever I did. Now, let's assume the case that you didn't do anything wrong, which is highly unlikely, because there's always some blame to be passed around to both people, or if there's more than two people, everyone has some sort of responsibility that they should tend to. But what I'm saying is, if generally you haven't done something horrible, and the other party is something if is someone that has done something horrible, the last thing they want is to be villainized. And I'm not saying you shouldn't call them out for what they did, because sometimes you can't help but do it. You can't help but point a finger. Actually, almost always you can't help but point a finger and say, you know what you did, you were wrong at this. And that's okay. You should do that. You should let them know that they were wrong at it. But there's a line that you shouldn't cross. There's a line that you shouldn't cross. There's a line that exists between making someone feel accountable for their actions and villainizing them and implying that you hate them, implying that, and you might hate what they did in the moment, but you never say you hate them because you actually don't. And sometimes you might, then it's a different case when you actually genuinely hate someone. I don't even know how to begin to comprehend that, but more often than not it's just that you hate what they did to you. And that line is something you should always be mindful of. And yeah, the way to be mindful about that line, and really the way to be mindful about the whole argument itself, everything you say, is to think before you talk. And I know I've been giving very, very general advice throughout this whole video up until now, but that's the truth. It doesn't, you cannot solve an argument by some tips and tricks and life hacks. It's the simplest things that you just have to do regardless of how difficult they are. And people forget this because they want the easy way out, they want to use a life hack, they want to find the shortcut, and that doesn't work that way. And I get why people feel that way. I used to be that way. I was like, you know what, if I'm really good at solving a problem with my partner, then I'm going to be a good partner. But that's not true. You can only be good at solving a problem if you're ready to face the consequences of your mistakes, and if you're willing to face all the ugly emotions that come with having the argument. It's just that the ugly emotions have a space, a box, if you might, and you never let them out of that box, or at the very least, you don't let yourself go so far that you might end up hurting that person to a point that you never intended to. And sometimes that damage is irreversible. Even if it feels like, oh, it's all fine, the argument has died and you guys are fine now, it still manifests itself in some or the other way later into the future. And it's extremely important to avoid that as much as possible. I'm not saying it's unavoidable, but well, nothing is unavoidable. So let's recap again. I think another side, I think I think another thing I want to talk about, the logical side of an argument, is since it's true that it doesn't matter who's right or who's wrong, you shouldn't be focusing on, yeah, and this is something many people forget. You shouldn't be focusing on proving that you're right and proving that what you said is true. Because if you're truthful and if you know you're truthful, then you won't have any reason to do so. And if you do your best in explaining or trying to make the other person understand that what you said are the correct facts, are what really is how it is, without missing on any information, without making it seem like you didn't do anything wrong when you actually did, whatever it is, when you state complete facts, you have no reason to suspect that the other person will not understand. It's a different thing when the other person is not willing to understand, because that's their problem. And all you want to make sure is you are being as the best person you can, or at least you're trying to cover as much ground as possible in terms of having a sensible argument. And you do that by telling the truth. Now, I want to talk about when they're not willing to listen. And I've said that, just take a break or whatever, but sometimes you can do everything right, you can be as truthful as you possibly can. You can be of as much favor to the other person as can. You can try to make everything as comfortable as possible for them. You can be incredibly selfless, and you can show that you love them, and you can do all of that. You can be the most perfect being that you can for this person at this moment, and you might still be met with anger, and they won't even be willing to listen to you. They won't even they just go back to pointing a finger, just trying to find faults in whatever you're saying, without realizing, without understanding that you're trying so hard. And I'll tell you what, there might have been moments that you were this person. I know I was. That you've been hurt so much that you don't care about rationality. You don't care about you don't care about if what they're doing is right or not. You don't care about the fact that they're understanding you. You don't care about the fact that they're trying so hard to make the environment comfortable for you. It doesn't matter, because something I've heard people say is the damage is already done, and it's true. I think if you're on the receiving end of this, the best thing you can do is just leave. And by leave, I don't mean leave the fucking relationship. That's up to you. I mean leave the conversation, leave the argument, because now it has gone so far that the basis of the argument serves no purpose to anyone. And that doesn't mean that you immediately keep the argument away and start reassuring them that, oh no, you didn't do anything wrong. No, it's not your fault anymore. It genuinely is just their fault. They're probably like, their emotions have come up to them into their chest and on their face, and it's just they're gurgling with fear and resentment and anxiety and anger and all of that. And the last thing they can do is say that they love you, or try to understand you, or even listen to you. It doesn't matter. There's a good chance they might have already left the conversation by now, but for if some reason they haven't, then you should be the one to do that. And I'm not saying you do that because this person has done something horrible and that's the only thing you can do. You do this because, well, it is the only thing you can do, but because the best way to handle it is to just let time pass. And I feel like, see, we're all humans, and regardless of how horrible someone is, I don't care how villainous you think they are, they're gonna feel guilty. They're gonna come back to you, and they're gonna talk to you nicely. They're gonna say good things. They're gonna be human again. And I think you just wait around for that. Because here's the thing, you've reached a point where you've tried everything you possibly can. Regardless of whether or not you're right or wrong, you've stated the original facts, you've been truthful, and there comes a point where you can literally do nothing anymore. That's when you stop feeling bad about, however, that's when you stop feeling bad about, um, that you didn't try enough, because at that point there's simply nothing you can do. And the best thing you can do for yourself, for your own mental peace, for your own emotions, is to just say that, you know what, you tried your best and you should be proud of that, but now it's no longer in your hands. And I see this happen a lot with people very close to me, where it starts off as a small argument and it builds up so much that in the process of trying to solve it, one or the other person just ends up feeling extremely, I don't even have a word for it. They're just all over the place. They're messy. It's like their limbs have been dislocated. They feel like a puddle of anger and emotion, like a mishmash of just shit. And if you you can see this in them. You can genuinely notice this. And you really can't do anything there. It's just wait for them to come back to their senses. Yeah. So if you want to summarize, then first of all is to remind yourself that you love them. And you know what, if it's possible, try to remind them in subtle ways that they love you. uh, I tread lightly on that one, because if you try a bit too hard, you might just end up ticking them off. uh, Second one is to state the obvious. Be vocal, reinforce good and reinforce good behaviors. Do not cross the line between acknowledging a bad behavior and villainizing it. And address the logical side. This video would have been so much better if it was scripted, but I wouldn't have been able to talk in the flow I have been talking right now. So I am aware of how rough it is, but I don't care. I'm gonna post it anyway. Spend so much time talking anyway, so let's just do it. It's only my second video. I doubt many people are gonna watch it, which is crazy, by the way. Just in just my first video, I think it was the Instagram story, 50 views up until now. If I check, there might have been more right now, but my phone's right here. 50 views. If I saw 50 people in front of me, that would be crazy. 50 people watched my video. That's crazy. I didn't expect that, but it doesn't matter. I'm just gonna keep it rough around the edges. I hope. My only motive is that you thought about the arguments that you have, and you, if if for any reason I gave you an opportunity to be intrigued or thoughtful, then please let me know. Please talk to me about it. And if in any way whatsoever you if in any way whatsoever you had a second thought about the way you act in an argument, or if you now know a better way to handle some part of some argument that you might be having right now, or that you might have in the future, then I guess uh, my motive has been achieved. If you want to have a conversation with me, then DM me on Instagram. I'm going to leave the link in the pinned comment, because I'm apparently not allowed to have any links in my description without verifying. And verifying it is going to take, I mean, I've verified it, but it's going to take a couple of days for it to come back to me. So go to the link, the pinned comment, click on the link and DM me if you wish to have a conversation with me, or just leave a comment and I might reply to it if I think it's an interesting take. Yeah, get in touch with me. It's hot as fuck out here.